South Carolina lawyer Alex Murdaugh in the killing of his wife and son.
A scary 911 call rocks South Carolina when rich lawyer Alex Murdaugh says he found his shot wife and son dead outside his mansion. But Alex has long battled addictions and money problems rarely talked about in his prominent family. Now, with other strange deaths connected to them, people wonder if secrets caused a murder to hide lies. The twisted saga began on June 7, 2021, when Maggie and Paul Murdaugh were discovered shot dead at the family's Islandton hunting property. Alex Murdaugh claimed he found their bodies by the dog kennels after returning from visiting his hospitalized parents. In an emotional 911 call placed at 10:07 p.m., Murdaugh cries uncontrollably and tells dispatchers his wife and child have been shot badly. When asked if they are breathing, he says no and urgently pleads for responders to please hurry. Murdaugh also denied seeing any suspects on the property. However, prosecutors determined the actual time of death to be around 8:50 p.m., over an hour before Murdaugh's dramatic call. Evidence showed 2 different firearms were used in the brutal ambush. Maggie sustained multiple rifle shots, while Paul was shot once with a shotgun at close range, the second blast blowing his brain out of his skull per the autopsy report. For over 13 months, no arrests were made in the shocking double homicide, despite intense public scrutiny. In July 2022, Alex Murdaugh was arrested after being indicted by a grand jury on murder charges for his wife Maggie's and son Paul's deaths. The indictment stated Alex shot Maggie with a rifle and Paul with a shotgun. Alex pleaded not guilty to 2 counts each of murder and weapon possession during a violent crime. Prosecutors said they would seek life in prison without parole for Alex, not the death penalty. Why did Alex Murdaugh kill his family? According to prosecutors, greed and desperation to cover up his crimes ultimately drove Murdaugh to murder. He was embroiled in substantial financial fraud, totaling millions of dollars at his law firm, PMPED, which colleagues had begun uncovering and confronting him about on the very day Maggie and Paul were killed. Additionally, Murdaugh faced intense legal scrutiny in an impending civil suit over a 2019 fatal boat crash involving his son Paul. The hearing was set for just 3 days after the murders, likely reopening questions about Murdaugh's finances as well. In reality, his finances were secretly in shambles from years of schemes to divert settlement money from PMPED. But with Maggie, Paul and the public focus now shifted to the shocking murders. Scrutiny of Murdaugh's monetary misdeeds temporarily eased in the aftermath. Prosecutors argued that with his house of cards collapsing, Murdaugh turned to brutally eliminating those closest to him as a desperate attempt to avoid his crimes being fully exposed and facing consequences. His explosive trial in early 2023 captivates the nation. The prosecution portrays a greedy, unethical Alex pushed to the brink, with secrets threatening to destroy his world as they knew it, painting him as a man who got away with corrupt behavior for years. They argue Alex took the ultimate deceitful act to escape exposure, willing to sacrifice even his family. They claim Alex briefly visited his mother's home as an alibi, knowing Maggie and Paul would be vulnerable targets back at the estate. Returning armed, Alex ruthlessly shot his own wife and child to benefit from their deaths, stealing precious years from them to save himself. Murdaugh was represented by defense lawyers Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin. Prosecutor Creighton Waters led the state's case against Murdaugh. The defense tried unsuccessfully to prohibit questions about Murdaugh's financial crimes. After arguments without the jury, Judge Clifton Newman ruled that testimony related to the financial crimes was admissible as motive evidence. A bomb threat briefly recessed the trial one day. Closing arguments started on March 1st. On March 2nd, another juror was dismissed for discussing case evidence improperly and replaced by an alternate. Prosecutor Waters and defense lawyer Griffin delivered closing statements before the jury began deliberations. The prosecution first called witnesses like the 911 responders and experts on firearms, phone data, and finances to argue motive. They tried compelling Snapchat to testify about Paul's video right before death. In a disputed recording, Alex said, "I did him so bad," about Paul. Prosecutors then used colleagues, clients, and a bank CEO to show Alex's money stress from impending exposure of his financial crimes. Experts analyzed cell data to create a timeline before resting their case. Alex Murdaugh's eldest and only surviving son, 26-year-old Buster Murdaugh, took the stand in his father's defense. He testified that Alex was utterly destroyed and heartbroken after Maggie and Paul's murders. Despite Buster's account of his father's devastation, prosecutors maintained Alex had killed his wife and younger son just an hour before their conversations. The defense called witnesses refuting the prosecution's time of death and criticizing the investigation. Most shockingly, Alex himself took the stand, admitting to opioid addiction, paranoia, lying about his movements, and stealing money, but denying killing Maggie and Paul. In cross-examination in their reply case, the prosecution attempted attacked Alex's testimony credibility. After the defense unsuccessfully sought a directed verdict of acquittal, the jury got the case. On March 2, 2023, after just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Alex Murdaugh guilty on all charges, 2 counts of murder and 2 weapon charges, in the deaths of his wife and son. Due to extensive public interest, the verdict was broadcast live nationally across major news outlets. Judge Clifton Newman denied the defense's motion for a mistrial, stating the evidence of guilt was overwhelming. He told jurors they had reached the proper conclusion based on the facts and law presented. The next day, Murdaugh received 2 consecutive life sentences without parole for the brutal double homicide. After sentencing, Murdaugh was taken to Kirkland Correctional Institution for a 45-day evaluation to determine which maximum security prison he will serve his time. The case that captivated the country ultimately ended with justice for Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, after an intense investigation exposed Alex Murdaugh as their killer. After Alex Murdaugh's guilty verdict, prosecutors held a press conference while the defense took media questions the next day, stating they would appeal and that Alex still had family support. However, Alex's brother Randy later said he didn't believe Alex had told the whole truth. In March 2023, Alex's lawyers filed a notice of appeal. That month, a Georgia auction house also conducted a sale of items from the Murdaugh property crime scene. In May, Alex was indicted on 22 federal counts of financial crimes like money laundering and fraud. He pleaded guilty to all the charges in November 2023 and received an additional 27 years in prison. In September, Alex's lawyers alleged jury tampering by a court clerk who published a book on the case, requesting a new trial. The clerk hired prominent lawyers to represent her against these claims, which the state Supreme Court is having a former justice oversee. After, Alex's team successfully sought the trial judge's removal for perceived bias. An investigation was also opened into the clerk's conduct. The prominent Murdaugh family's good reputation came crashing down. Their generations of secrets and wrongdoing were revealed to everyone. The family's unchecked greed and arrogance led to the horrific killing of Maggie and Paul. Their crimes left a permanent stain on South Carolina's history.